When it comes to the acceptance of change, humans are all over the map. We like it. We don't like it. We like it when we make it. We don't like it when someone else makes it for us. When something is changed and we like it, then find out no one else likes it, we dislike it and say we never liked it in the first place. And the same can be said in reverse. Change comes in all forms: the change we make, change made for us, change for the sake of change, and change made out of necessity. Your choice every day. The change out of necessity category is where the group Chicago found itself in 1978. On the heels of the untimely death of Terry Kath in January of that year, Chicago almost broke up.
Children play in the park, they don't know.
Possessing a voice filled with soul, Kath was as adventurous with a guitar as he was talented. Admired by many, including Jimi Hendrix, his outsized personality was the gravitational force of the group. In a split second, Chicago's future went from bright to deeply unsettled. Many friends of the group, including Doc Severinsen, encouraged the band to stay together and continue on. Ultimately, that's what they did. They went back into the studio and by October of that year released Hot Streets, the first album of this new era that also reflected a change in their sound. This new sound, it was written back then, leaned into disco, some saying it was disco. Frankly, I don't see it. There's no getting around the fact that the album has a more mainstream sound as opposed to the jazz rock fusion we were used to hearing from Chicago. And some songs like Take a Chance and the title track Hot Streets kinda, sorta, maybe brush up against a disco sound. But flat out disco? Sorry, I'm just not seeing it. Maybe this perception of Chicago going disco was fueled by the fact that the Bee Gees provided backing vocals on the track Little Miss Lovin'. Plus, disco was at its peak in 78 and 79. Once we got into the 80s, disco in the US was starting to fade. And you had the disco drift of other bands in the late 70s, like ELO, Grateful Dead, David Bowie, even the Rolling Stones with Miss You. So people probably figured if the Stones were doing it, hell, anyone with an up-tempo song must be going disco. Admittedly, I'm a big fan of Chicago and no fan of disco, so those two biases may be creating a blind spot for me. Guitarist Donnie Dacus was brought on board for the unenviable job of trying to replace Terry Kath. Dacus, having worked with Billy Joel, Boz Scaggs, John Lennon, Roger McGuinn, The Turtles, Deep Purple, Elton John, REO Speedwagon, you get the picture. Dacus was accomplished, and his style was evident throughout the album, and I'll swing back to Dacus in a moment. But what makes this album relevant? Every album's important to the band, to be sure. The level of importance to the general public is determined by sales of the singles it produces and sales of the album as a whole. One of the strongest selling points for any group and their work is being familiar. A familiar sound, style, vibe, it all has to line up for the public to buy in. So with the tragic change Chicago was now faced with, how was it going to be reflected in their work? Chicago of the 1980s was a more mainstream, softer rock sound for the most part. The album Hot Streets, while not fully embracing it, was the beginning of this softer sound. The horns, a signature of Chicago, started to fade into the background, and in some cases, like with the track Love Was New, were left out completely. This was also the first album by Chicago since the release of Chicago at Carnegie Hall in 1971 to break the string of making the name of an album a number. In between Carnegie Hall and Hot Streets were the albums Chicago 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. For the record, Hot Streets would have been Chicago 12 and was followed by Chicago 13. Another signal that the transformation was underway. October of '78 saw the release of the album and its first single, Alive Again. Alive Again has all the signature Chicago sounds, big horns, strong guitars, and vocals. The horns were more complimentary and less out front than earlier works, but still very present. There's a more mainstream feel to the song, but in a good way. Sometime after the song was released, I remember hearing and reading that the song was also viewed as somewhat of a statement by the band. Alive Again has a strong, positive tone of someone being brought out of the darkness by the love of another person. But the first two lines in the lyrics were also being interpreted to be about the group itself. Yesterday, I would not have believed that tomorrow the sun would shine, which was possibly the mindset of the band when Terry Kath died. The darkness of his death and the possibility of breaking up the band did weigh heavy on them, but they continued on. In a September 2018 short write-up on the website Something Else, Charlie Ritchie, I think, sums this up pretty well. I was totally disappointed in Hot Streets, Chicago's first album with a new guitarist, when it debuted in 1978. However, it has grown on me considerably over the years. While I still wanted the band to be Chicago Transit Authority again, I knew it could never be. When that realization sunk in, I liked it a lot more. We all knew poor Donnie Dacus would be compared to Terry Kath even before we heard him play. It wasn't fair then, and it still isn't. He replaced a man who should be a legend. Fortunately, on this album, Dacus proved he belonged, for now anyway. The new guy started off with a bang. On Hot Street's opening track, Alive Again, he sings back up to Peter Cetera's lead vocal and does a fine job with his first guitar solo. But the important thing is the song's exuberance. The entire group feels Kath's presence, and it shows. You may have expected a serious work about their beloved late bandmate, but he never seemed like the type who would want Chicago to be forlorn over his passing. He would have preferred to be celebrated in this way. I originally wrote Alive Again as a love song, composer James Pankow wrote on Chicago's website, but ultimately as recognition of Kath's guiding spirit shining down from above. We all wish Kath was still earthbound, making music for all of us today, but as Pankow alluded to, in a lot of ways, he's still here. So ultimately, Alive Again could be as much about the band coming out of that darkness as it is about the love of one person for another. About Alive Again, Cashbox wrote, "It has aggressive horns, high-riding vocals, tight and melodic structure, and a bright optimism." Which means it's probably no coincidence that Alive Again was the first track and the lead-off single for the new album. Chicago may have just been telling us we're still here and we're still relevant. The public buy-in was strong for the debut song, reaching number 14 on Billboard's Hot 100. So you got the sense of, okay, it sounds and looks a bit different, but it's still Chicago under the hood. Everything will be just fine. As Hot Streets gained more exposure, however, the public and writers were starting to raise their collective eyebrow at the album. On the one hand, we were all glad to see Chicago continuing on. When you see a friend get back up after being knocked down by life, you're happy for them and optimistic for their future. On the other hand, that friend wasn't the same anymore. Some change was inevitable, probably even expected, but this felt different. This was a change we weren't sure if we were ready for. That change was first realized with the next single, No Tell Lover, in December of 1978. Like Alive Again, No Tell Lover did well. It duplicated Alive Again's success by also reaching number 14 on the Hot 100. But it was a top 5 song on the U.S. Adult Contemporary chart. Adult Contemporary, or AC, being a formal term for soft rock, or as it has casually become known today, yacht rock. Soft rock? How could that be? This was Chicago, 25 or 6 to 4, or Saturday in the Park. Does anybody really know what time it is? And yes, even Alive Again. What's the soft rock business? Now, earlier songs like Just You and Me and I've Been Searching So Long scored big as soft rock hits as well, but they also scored as good or better on the Hot 100 and Cashbox Top 100. Now, Chicago had a soft rock song in No Tell Lover whose performance was better on the AC charts than the Hot 100. For the public, this was uncharted territory, at least we believed it was. No Tell Lover was about what the title said. Cashbox put it this way by calling it a classy pop single that tells a sultry tale of masked love. No searching for a deeper meaning here, it is what it is. The third release was Gone Long Gone in March of 1979. It seems skepticism of the album and the group may have been at its peak by this point. Gone Long Gone only reached number 73. The album Hot Streets overall did very well. It went platinum and reached number 12 on Billboard's Top 200 Albums chart. But as far as the charts go, that's all there was for Hot Streets. The other 7 tracks on the album were good offerings, nothing bad, just, I guess, not chart-worthy. Tracks like Little Miss Lovin', Ain't It Time, and Gone Long Gone are upbeat tracks that offer a peek into what was with Chicago. Strong guitars and percussion with layered vocals and the horns were ever present. Now, the horns weren't there for Gone Long Gone, but a piano bridge and tight harmonies in the chorus and a George Harrison-sounding solo guitar helped make it a good song, despite its chart performance. Tracks like The Greatest Love on Earth, Love Was New, Show Me the Way, and No Tell Lover seem to be written for the AC charts, not even a quick glance in the direction of rock. This isn't to say that the album was bad, not even close. In fact, I would say that diehard Chicago fans who may have turned their backs on it when it came out, like Charlie Ritchie, probably are now embracing Hot Streets. Chicago wasn't the only band to see a transformation like this in the 1970s. After breaking up in '71, Jefferson Airplane reformed as Jefferson Starship and was going through a similar transformation.
Precious love, I'll give to you as the sky.
By 1978, Jefferson Starship had released their 4th album, Earth, which included the top 40 hits, Count on Me and Runaway. The album dances along that fine line of rock and soft rock. Both songs are fantastic. Marty Balin absolutely nails the lead vocals, but they're soft rock standards.
When the truth is found to be
Slide back 11 years to 1967 to Jefferson Airplane and the songs White Rabbit and Somebody to Love, and you get an entirely different vibe. Jefferson Airplane was psychedelic rock and acid rock. Jefferson Starship was rock and soft rock. Rock, in Starship's case, was an all-encompassing and fairly corporate term, nowhere near rebellious as it was the decade before. The Doobie Brothers were going through a similar type of change when Michael McDonald took over lead singing duties from Tom Johnston when he got sick. Their sound of guitar-based rock was giving way to blue-eyed soul, R&B, and soft rock.
You don't know me, but I'm your brother.
So while Chicago was charting new territory with this change in their sound, this was nothing new for the music industry. As far as the industry was concerned, Chicago, with Hot Streets, was just the next band in line. I was 17 years old when Hot Streets came out. I wasn't savvy enough yet to see what was on the horizon for the band, or make subtle delineations between what is and what isn't a rock band. Now, I'm not saying I thought Hot Streets was on par with anything Led Zeppelin put out, but if I became familiar with you as a rock band, well, you were still a rock band, in my untrained ear and nascent musical palate. So, Hot Streets comes out in 1978, and in what could be described as a caveman action, Chicago puts out album, Mick buys album. It took a while, but the slow realization started to set in that Hot Streets wasn't one of those albums that was on everyone's radar. Others didn't hold it in the same regard as I did. A mild blow to my young musical ego, but I lived to be wrong another day. This was an early lesson of everything isn't always as it appears. To me, Hot Streets was a good album, Alive Again was a good song, and Chicago was still a rock band. To others, way more seasoned than I, not really. Okay, but 44 years later, I believe more have warmed up to Hot Streets than find fault with it. And if you're still in the camp that finds it lacking, spend some time and get to know it again. It might just turn out that you may come to appreciate it, either for what it is or for something you hadn't expected it to be. And if your change of heart helps keep it in the musical consciousness for another generation or two, well then everything will be just fine.
Yesterday I would not have believed that tomorrow the Bye.